Ask yourself, are you lucky? Today I'm going to teach you about how to hack luck, how luck works, and why it's crucial to success. If I can, I will also try to help you with the secret to it all in business, in my opinion, and even the purpose of life. Throughout today's chat, if you have any questions or you need to know anything, please feel free to ask. Throughout this talk, we will be answering your questions and helping you in any way that I can. And at the end, of course, we will also have a Q&A. So I was born in England. I grew up here, and then I lived in Hong Kong and China and Thailand for 20 years. I have built 19 companies, 13 of them with no money, and I have invested in 74 startups. Now, the first thing I'll try and share with you is the secret to it all. And when I started investing in businesses around 10 years ago, I wanted to understand what it is that would make a business succeed or fail. I'd had my own experience with building businesses, but it was quite different when investing in other people. So I wanted to perhaps understand if there was a trait, a system that I could follow to make me decide whether or not to invest in a business. So I went and studied all the successful businesses as well as the failures. And I discovered something that pretty much changed my view on how everything works. So one example of someone I studied intensely was Elon Musk. Now, we all know his story. He was one of the co-founders of PayPal. And what was kind of interesting about the nuance of even PayPal was that he didn't actually come up with the idea of PayPal. He had another company called X. And then he saw Peter Thiel and the other guys at PayPal and what they were doing. And instead of trying to compete and build it on his own, he did something quite smart. He went and joined their team. Now, I call this 1 + 1 = 11. And I think that it's actually an interesting formula when trying to be successful. But Elon Musk, as we all know, along with a lot of other people from PayPal, made a lot of money from that company. PayPal actually, for Elon Musk, generated $110 million when he sold the company. And what he then did, or he could have done perhaps, was buy lots of houses and rent them out and probably never have to work again in his life. But we all know that's not what he did. He went and then took that money and invested it in things like Tesla and SpaceX and later the Boring Company, and he became the richest man on the planet. So what made him go and do that? And it turns out that what made Elon Musk do it is what makes every successful entrepreneur today do it. And actually, for that matter, every successful, relevant brand today do the same thing. Elon Musk knows what I know, that the secret to it all is you've got to act like you've got nothing to lose. So Elon Musk, taking his 110 million and putting it into all these other businesses, he was actually famously quoted as saying that within a couple of years of that payout, he was broke, living on a friend's couch. And he had a choice to put what he had left money-wise into SpaceX or into Tesla. If he split it down the middle, both companies might fail. And that's what he did, however. He split it down the middle and put it into both companies and almost went bankrupt. But in that moment, in that conviction, in that no choice but to succeed moment, he made it. The Vikings used to talk about this concept of like burning the boats. Basically, you get somewhere, you burn the boats, you can't go back. You have no choice but to make it work. You've got to act like you've got nothing to lose. Apple are famous, for example, for inventing the iPod. And that was a hugely profitable business. But they didn't sit back and just take the profits from that business. What they did instead is they cannibalized their own business by inventing the iPhone. They included the iPod in the iPhone. And that meant the iPod sales dropped dramatically. But of course, the iPhone went on to be successful. And now I think Apple, at this moment, are a $3 trillion company. Because they're willing to lose what they've got. They're not holding on. Google, same story. They're cannibalizing their own business. Actually, every successful business and every failed business has this trait. Blockbusters famously had a meeting with Netflix and saw them as competition to their store-based traffic. So of course, they didn't work with them. They weren't willing to cannibalize their existing business. They weren't willing to risk it all. And every single failure story and every single success story has this element in it. By accident, I personally have lived this way. It wasn't by design. I wasn't naturally born to take risk. I was born into a safe family where my parents wanted me to grow up to be a lawyer. I can remember at 13 years old being asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "A lawyer." Now I suggest people don't ask kids that. I suggest people ask kids, what problem would you like to solve when you get older? I think that's much more exciting framing. But back then, for me, I was very risk averse. I didn't know how to take risk. And I remember a very important moment in my life, which is actually quite a sad moment in my life, that has been pivotal to where I am today. Sadly, at 15 years old, my father suddenly died of a heart attack. And 3 weeks later, I had an argument with my mother and she kicked me out of home. And I found myself in quite a desperate situation where suddenly I had no choice but to figure out how to survive. And something in this dark and horrible moment in my life woke up in my brain that was magical. I call it the entrepreneur muscle. But I stopped going to school. I was suddenly trying to figure out a way to find a home, a place to live. Therefore, I'd have to pay rent. And my brain came alive. For the first time in my life, I had independent thinking. And I remember what happened like it was yesterday. I was walking past this big, beautiful house in Cambridge in England, where I grew up. And in that house, there was a massive garden, and the garden was a complete mess. And I walked past it, and for the first time, my brain said, why is that garden messy and that house is so nice? Maybe they need a gardener. And in my desperation to earn money and survive, I found the courage to go and knock on the front door of that house. The person came to the front door and I said, "Hi, my name's Simon Squibb and I've got a gardening company. I noticed you've got a messy garden. Would you like me to take care of it for you?" And to my shock, that person said, "It's amazing you've come and knocked on my door. I was just thinking I need to get help with my garden. I don't have any time. How much do you charge?" And I just picked a number out of the air. £200 a month, I said. And to my shock, they said, "Great, when can you start?" And as I walked down the path of that house, I just realised something amazing had happened. And that day, I decided to knock on every door I could and see if I could do the same again. And I knocked on over 110 doors that day and managed to get 11 people to say that I would be their gardener. I had no brochure, no website, no money, no experience in gardening, and I had 11 clients. It was a Saturday, and I remember going home thinking, wow, this is great. I've got 11 clients, only realising I don't have any money to actually service those gardens and don't have any money to buy the equipment to do the work. So I had a brainwave. The following Sunday, I went back to those houses with a little contract saying what I was going to do. And I said, "Would you mind please giving me a 50% deposit?" And to my surprise, again, they gave me the deposit, which allowed me then to buy the equipment. And later on, I went on to hire hundreds of people and build an incredible business. And all from this one moment. Now, what's really fascinating, I guess, about I think this journey I've been on is that I sometimes say my father gave me one last gift before he left. And that was the ability to fail. There was no one judging me anymore. I could go and knock on that door. They could say no. It wouldn't really matter. I could try this gardening company, and if it worked, then great. If it didn't, no one was judging me. I'd been given the ability to fail. I'd been given that freedom. And so in the modern world, I think a lot of us have got a little bit confused about how we actually push through things like fear. And this is what led me on to understanding how important luck is in life. So when my son was born 4 years ago, I wanted to write a book for him. I wanted him to know how his father had made it, how I'd gone from homeless at 15 years old to a multimillionaire living in Hong Kong. How did I do it? And so I started to write a book. And at the end of the book, I read it back to myself and felt like there was something missing from it. And I realised what that one thing was. I'd been lucky. Now, it almost is an insult to say to someone who's successful, you were lucky. Most people will react with, well, I worked hard. But the truth is, I'd realised there was at least 5 moments in my life that if it had gone a different way in that moment, I wouldn't be where I am today. An example of that would be that first house that I knocked on. If I'd knocked on the door and the person had said no, then perhaps I wouldn't have realised there was a market. Perhaps I wouldn't have gone on to learn this thing about creating in your head and making it real is possible if you go out there and start selling and pitching and pushing and innovating. If I'm not willing to risk it all, I wouldn't have learned it if I hadn't had that lucky moment. So I started to study luck. And it turns out there's a 3-step process to actually hacking luck. And I'm going to share it with you. It's taken me a very long time to understand this. And this is basically it. It seems that luck is in fact broken into 2 parts. There is 2% of your life, and only 2% of your life, that is in fact random luck. This is luck you cannot influence. And that example of that type of luck would be where you're born. I don't care how hard you work or how much you hustle, you're not going to change where you're born. And so that element definitely influences your life in a dramatic way. We all know that where you're born will affect your life. However, 98% of your life is in fact luck you can influence. And you influence it by following these 3 elements. The first element is basically taking risk. The saying, the harder you work, the luckier you get, in my view, is a lie. But a more true saying that should be out there more is the more risk you take, the luckier you get. Now, the problem with risk in the modern world is that when we're taking risk, we feel fear. And fear has been misunderstood in today's world. Because we can say no to things so easily, we can turn off that feeling of fear very quickly. But we've forgotten what fear is actually meant to do for us. Fear, it turns out, is a superpower, and one we should definitely leverage. And I can pinpoint each moment in my life where I was lucky. For example, I was asked to do a TED talk, and I wanted to say no. I was nervous. I felt my hands sweating. I didn't want to do it. But I didn't. I leaned into fear. I took a risk and I said yes. These sorts of things have been transformational in my life. And so by taking risk, you get more luck. By leaning into fear, you are able to take risk. You have to remember where fear originally came from. Fear was a lion is coming towards us. We feel fear. We're able to run faster, literally, think differently, and survive using that superpower. We're meant to leverage fear. We're meant to feel it. You're not meant to be able to turn it off as easily as we can today. The other 2 elements, very important elements of ensuring you hack luck. One is basically persistence. Now, a very famous university did a study on the top 10% of salespeople, what made them do well. And the top 10% of salespeople do something called a 5-point contact strategy, which basically means they get a new lead and they will contact that lead at least 5 times before they'll consider it a dead lead. Often no more than 6 times, but on average 5 times. So they might send them an email and then they'll do a follow-up email. Then maybe they'll leave them a voice note or call them. And then maybe they'll send them something and then they'll wait a month and they'll try again and contact them. So that's the top 10% of salespeople. But the top 1% of salespeople, something quite different was happening. And I consider myself, now I've reviewed this study and reviewed this information, as one of the top 1%, but I didn't know it. The top 1% have something called an infinity approach to sales. And basically, I remember myself, when I started my agency business Fluid, writing down 50 companies that I wanted to work with, companies I respected, companies I felt I could make a difference with. And I remember having a strategy to contact those companies and the individuals in those companies every single month somehow, whether it was sending them some insight piece on their industry to help them be better at their jobs or know more, or whether it was simply happy birthday or Merry Christmas. I always found a way to contact them and connect with them. And I remember it took me 9 years and 3 months to get all 50 brands on board as a client. Persistence is crucial if you want to be successful. The final element of hacking luck is understanding your destination. So many people don't, and it shocks me. And I realise now, looking back at my career, that I always knew my destination. And a destination translation could be purpose. Why are you here? Why are you personally here? Why is your company here? And once you understand your purpose, dramatic things happen. For example, if you're in a car and you get in that car and you don't know where you're going, you'll go around in circles and burn fuel and energy going nowhere. But of course, if you know where you're going, you know how much fuel you need, you know who to have in the car with you on the journey, you know what to pack in the car for when you arrive, you know what car you need to drive to get there. And that's a crucial element to ensuring luck. You've got to know your target. And I know for a fact that people that pick these three elements up and run with them, take more risk, lean into fear, be persistent and know your destination, dramatically increase their chances of luck. Now, one final twist on this that I found fascinating. Buddha once said that we'll all have 10,000 hours of good luck and 10,000 hours of bad luck. But I've discovered that in fact, we're all going to have at least 20,000 hours of luck. And whether it's bad or whether it's good is often a matter of perspective. So I had bad luck when I was 15, but today I have a wonderful life. So as awful as it was at the time, I look back and actually in a way thank my father for helping me and look at these things with gratitude instead of feeling like I had bad luck. So it is all to do with mindset. Now in my book, I wrote a poem and this is a book for my son, not one I'm releasing, but I thought I'd share that poem with you because I thought it might be useful, and I'm going to read it to you. Fear is an asset. Luck is a skill. Passion is a must-have, and purpose is your fuel. I hope you found this insight useful. I'm now here to answer your questions.